a horse marked as cursed, a farm on the brink of ruin, and a secret buried for decades. What seemed like a mistake with no turning back could become the key to a forgotten legacy. The sun rose slowly over the endless plains of the Texas countryside, painting the swaying grasses golden in the morning breeze. Ethan Anderson gripped the steering wheel with unnecessary force, his eyes fixed on the dirt road stretching ahead like a red scar cutting through the landscape. It had been 15 years since he'd set foot on this land. 15 years running from the weight of traditions, expectations, and the destiny everyone had mapped out for him. "You always knew you'd come back someday," he murmured to himself. His words lost in the rumble of the pickup's engine. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a mirage, both familiar and strange. The main house, with its whitewashed walls and red tiles, seemed smaller than he remembered. The corral stood empty, the fences needed repairs, and his father's absence hung in the air like a ghostly presence. He parked near the porch where so many important decisions had been made without his input. Old Tom appeared in the doorway, his face marked by years and worry. The elderly foreman had taken care of the property since Ethan left for Austin, keeping everything running while waiting for the heir's return. "Young Ethan," said the man, his voice breaking, "thought I'd never see you in these parts again." "Neither did I, Tom, neither did I." Ethan stepped down from the truck, feeling the weight of responsibility descend with him. "How are things?" The foreman shook his head, his eyes lost in the distant fields. "Won't lie to you, sir, things ain't easy. After your father, after he passed, lots of folks showed interest in the land. Montgomery came by 3 times just last month. Says he wants to help, but his eyes shine too bright when he looks at our pastures." Ethan knew Richard Montgomery by reputation, a man who had started with a small property and now controlled thousands of acres in the region. They said he had a gift for being in the right place at the right time, especially when traditional families were going through hard times. "And you? What do you think we should do?" Old Tom walked to the nearest fence, resting his hands on the wire. "Your grandfather always said this land has a memory, you know, that it keeps secrets and someday tells everything to those who know how to listen." He turned to Ethan, his eyes shining with unexpected intensity. Maybe it's time someone listened properly. They spent the rest of the morning touring the property. Ethan rediscovered every corner, every trail, every marker that defined the Anderson family lands. But something was different. Some fences seemed to be in positions that didn't match his childhood memories. When he questioned old Tom, the old man just muttered something about necessary adjustments and changed the subject. In the afternoon, visitors arrived. First came Montgomery in person, a tall, elegant man who seemed out of place in the rural environment with his impeccable button-down shirt and dust-free shoes. "Ethan, my condolences for your father's passing. He was an honorable man," said Montgomery, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know coming back must be difficult, especially with all the responsibility that falls on your shoulders." "Thank you, Montgomery. I'm still getting used to the idea." "That's natural. That's exactly why I came to make a proposal that could solve your problems." Montgomery walked to the porch, surveying the fields as if they were already his. "I'm prepared to make a generous offer for the property. Above market value, cash, payment. You could return to your life in the city without worries." Ethan felt something twist in his stomach. "The ranch isn't for sale." "Not yet," Montgomery replied with a cold smile. "But managing a property this size alone is complicated. The costs, the labor, the bureaucratic issues. Think about my offer. Sometimes the best way to honor your ancestors' memory is knowing when it's time to move on." After Montgomery left, Ethan sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the lands that were now his responsibility. Old Tom approached with 2 cups of coffee. "He doesn't give up easy," said the foreman. "I noticed." Ethan accepted the coffee, feeling the familiar aroma calm his nerves. "Tom, I need to know something. These fences, have they always been in these positions?" The old man remained silent for a long moment, as if weighing his words. "Your father was a man of peace, son. Sometimes peace comes at a high price." "What does that mean?" "It means not everything that seems lost is truly lost, and not everything That seems was found the right way. Old Tom finished his coffee and stood up. Tomorrow there's a fair in Riverdale. How about we drop by? It's been a while since you've seen how the region's changed. Ethan nodded, feeling there was much more behind the foreman's words than he was willing to reveal at that moment. Night fell over the ranch with its characteristic quietness, but the silence seemed to carry secrets that whispered in the shadows between the trees. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The Riverdale Agricultural Fair was bustling with activity when Ethan and Old Tom arrived the next morning. The smell of dust mixed with leather, manure, and animal sweat brought back childhood. Memories when he accompanied his father on these excursions he considered adventures. Now, with adult eyes, he saw the fair as a theater where deals were sealed with handshakes and reputations were built or destroyed in minutes. "I didn't come here to buy anything," said Ethan as they walked between the makeshift corrals. "I know, son, but sometimes things find us even when we're not looking." Old Tom waved to some acquaintances, exchanging greetings and regional news. Ethan observed the movement with the detachment of someone who had spent years away from that world. Breeders displayed their best specimens. Buyers examined teeth and hooves with expertise, and the auctioneer tested the microphone, preparing for another day of sales. Everything seemed to follow the same ritual as always, until something changed. In the atmosphere, a murmur ran through the crowd like ripples on a lake. Conversations dropped in volume, and Ethan noticed people beginning to move away from a specific area of the corrals. Curious, he walked in the opposite direction of the crowd's flow. "Where are you going, Ethan?" Old Tom followed him, but there was hesitation in his steps. "I want to see what's causing such a commotion." When they reached the isolated corral, Ethan understood the reason for the agitation. A magnificent, imposing black horse paced nervously within the enclosed space. Its coat shone like polished obsidian under the morning sun, and its eyes had an intensity that seemed to penetrate the soul of anyone who dared to look at it. The animal moved with a wild elegance, each muscle defined beneath the dark coat. "That's obsidian," someone nearby murmured. "Nobody can tame that animal." "They say it's cursed," added another. "Everyone who tried to ride it ended up in trouble." Ethan approached the fence, ignoring the warning glances from those present. The horse stopped pacing and looked directly at him. For a moment, the noise of the fair disappeared, and there was only that intense, challenging gaze. There was something in those eyes, an ancient intelligence and a deep sadness that touched something inside Ethan's chest. "This horse isn't from around here," said Old Tom in a low voice, coming to Ethan's side. "Showed up a few months ago, nobody knows where from. The previous owner, well, he's not around anymore. What happened to him? Disappeared. Left the horse as payment for a debt and was never seen again." Old Tom observed Obsidian with a strange expression, as if recognizing something familiar. Since then, 3 different owners have tried. None could handle him. The auctioneer approached the corral with evident reluctance. "Folks, we'll start with this specimen here. Stallion, 4 years old, good lineage." His voice lacked conviction. "Who'll make the first bid?" Absolute silence. Nobody moved. The auctioneer persisted, progressively lowering the initial value, but the crowd remained motionless. Some even began to move away, as if proximity to the animal might bring bad luck. Ethan felt something inexplicable happen inside him. A compulsion. A need he couldn't rationally explain. He raised his hand. $500, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The auctioneer looked surprised and relieved at the same time. "We have 500. Anyone give?" "More?" No one spoke. The gazes turned to Ethan with a mixture of admiration and pity. Some shook their heads as if he had just signed his own sentence. "Sold for $500. Old Tom pulled Ethan by the arm. "Son, are you sure about what you just did?" "No," Ethan answered honestly, still looking at Obsidian, "but I felt I needed to do it." Sarah Miller appeared beside them as if she had materialized from nowhere. Ethan recognized her immediately, even after all those years. The girl who played with him in childhood had become a beautiful, confident woman, with green eyes that shone with the same vivacity as before. "Ethan Anderson, I can't believe you're back." Sarah hugged him affectionately, but her expression quickly changed to concern. "Tell me you didn't just buy obsidian. I just bought obsidian." Sarah sighed, running her hands through her brown hair. "You were always stubborn, but this is crazy. This horse has a terrible reputation in the region." "That's exactly why I need him. Seems like we're both misunderstood around here. Ethan, I've worked with horses for years. I'm a trainer, I know animal behavior like nobody else. This horse isn't just difficult, he's different." Sarah looked at Obsidian, who had stopped near the fence where they were talking. "But if you're determined to do this crazy thing, you'll need help. Would you help me?" "Someone has to keep you alive," she said with a smile that disguised her real concern. "But there are conditions. First, no trying to ride him until we understand what makes him so agitated. Second, anything we discover about this animal we share. And third," she made a dramatic pause, "if I say it's too dangerous, you listen to me." Ethan extended his hand. "Deal." As they shook hands, Obsidian neighed loudly, a sound that echoed throughout the fair and made several people turn. The horse was watching them intensely, as if understanding every word of the conversation. Old Tom approached the animal and, to Ethan's surprise, Obsidian lowered his head in acknowledgement. "You already knew this horse, didn't you?" asked Ethan. The old foreman just smiled mysteriously. "Sometimes the past comes back in ways we don't expect, son. Let's take your new friend home and see what he has to teach us." Transporting Obsidian to the ranch was an ordeal that tested the patience and determination of everyone involved. The horse refused to enter the trailer, rearing and neighing whenever they approached. It was only when old Tom whispered something in his ear that the animal finally calmed down enough to be led. "What did you say to him?" asked Ethan, impressed by the sudden change in behavior. "Things he needed to hear," the foreman answered enigmatically. Sarah followed them in her own truck, maintaining a safe distance, but ready to help if necessary. Throughout the journey, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the rearview mirror, watching the trailer sway slightly with the horse's movements. There was something about Obsidian that intrigued him deeply, a feeling that his impulsive purchase was part of something bigger. Arriving. At the ranch, they installed the horse in the corral furthest from the house. Obsidian examined every inch of the new environment with meticulous attention, as if looking for something specific. His eyes lingered on the main house, the old barns, and especially on the rusty weather vane that still turned lazily atop the barn. "He's recognizing the place," observed Sarah, leaning on the fence. "Horses have excellent memory, but his reaction is very specific, as if he'd been here before." "Impossible. I knew every horse on the ranch when I was a kid." "Memory can be inherited, you know." Old Tom approached, carrying the saddle that had come with Obsidian. "Horses pass behaviors and even memories to their offspring. Sometimes what we think is instinct is actually ancient knowledge." Sarah took the saddle from the foreman's hands to examine it better. It was an old piece, hand-worked leather with silver details that time had darkened. As she cleaned off the accumulated dust, her fingers found something engraved on the inside of the leather. "Ethan, look at this." He came closer and saw a symbol carefully engraved in the leather, a circle split in half with initials worn by time that seemed to be BS or perhaps BT. The work was delicate, done by someone who knew the craft, and there was an almost artistic quality to the execution. "How strange," murmured Ethan, running his finger over the engraving. "I've never seen anything like it." "I have," said old Tom quietly. "Your grandfather had a similar mark on an old tool he kept in the barn, said it was the symbol of a friend who had to leave." "What friend?" The old man hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "A cattle driver named Billy. Good man, honest. Knew these lands like nobody else." He paused, observing Obsidian, who had approached the fence as if listening to the conversation. "He disappeared many years ago, left only unfulfilled promises and half-told stories." Sarah continued examining the saddle, finding other details that caught her attention. Small marks in the leather, signs of wear that told a story of long rides, and meticulous care. This saddle was made to last generations. Whoever made it knew it would be passed down. That night, after Sarah left, promising to return the next day, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. He walked to his bedroom window and observed Obsidian in the corral. The horse remained alert, looking toward the house as if standing guard. There was something comforting about that silent vigil. The next morning, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. An elderly lady, leaning on an ornate cane, walked slowly to the porch where Ethan was having coffee with old Tom. "Are you Ethan Anderson?" she asked, her voice weak but determined. "I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Mrs. Carol Richards. I heard you bought the horse at yesterday's auction." She opened a small leather bag and removed something wrapped in cloth. "I need to show you something." With trembling hands, Mrs. Carroll unwrapped an ancient medallion, rusted by time, but still preserving intricate details. Ethan immediately recognized the symbol, the same split circle engraved on Obsidian's saddle. "This medallion belonged to my brother Billy," she said, tears shining in her tired eyes. "He disappeared 30 years ago, but before leaving he told me to keep this. Said that one day someone would come looking for answers and that I should give this to that person." Ethan took the medallion with reverent care. It was heavy, made of solid silver, and on the back was an inscription almost erased by time. "For the one who knows how to read the signs of the land." "Mrs. Carroll, what did your brother do? Why did he disappear?" The old lady sighed deeply. "Billy was a cattle driver, but he was also a man who believed in justice. He discovered that many land deeds in the region had been altered, that entire families had lost properties through forgeries and dubious legal maneuvers." She pointed to the medallion. "He kept evidence, documents, maps, said that one day the truth would come to light. And what happened to this evidence? He hid it before he disappeared. Left clues, marks, signs that only someone with the right eyes could decipher." Mrs. Carroll stood up with difficulty. "When I heard someone had bought Billy's horse and brought it here, I knew the time had come." "Billy's horse? Obsidian belonged to your brother." "Obsidian?" She smiled for the first time. "That wasn't the name Billy used. He called him Guardian, said the horse knew where to find what was lost." After Mrs. Carroll left, Ethan remained alone on the porch, holding the medallion, and trying to process everything he had discovered. Old Tom approached, wearing an expression that mixed relief and concern. "You knew about all this, didn't you?" asked Ethan. "Knew some things. Your grandfather made me promise to protect Billy's secrets until the right time came. When I saw—" "You buy that horse yesterday?" Old Tom shook his head. "I knew the moment had arrived." Ethan rose and walked to the corral where Obsidian, or Guardian, remained watching. The horse approached the fence when he saw him coming, and for the first time since buying him, Ethan felt the animal didn't see him as a stranger, but as someone who finally understood his true mission. 3 days passed since Mrs. Carroll's visit, and Ethan felt that each hour brought him closer to discoveries that could change everything. Sarah had established a daily routine with Obsidian, working patiently to gain the horse's trust. Progress was slow but noticeable. The animal now allowed her to approach and even touch him at times. "He's beginning to trust," said Sarah during breakfast on the porch. "But there's something very specific that makes him nervous. When the wind blows from a certain direction, he gets agitated. It's like he's trying to show us something." Ethan observed the dark clouds accumulating on the horizon. The air had changed during the night, charged with the electricity that precedes severe storms in the plains. "Looks like we're in for heavy rain today." And Obsidian knows it. Look at his behavior. In the corral, the horse walked in circles, occasionally pausing to look in the direction of the old tool shed. His nostrils flared as if catching something, in the air that humans couldn't perceive. Old Tom arrived from town with supplies and a worried expression. "Folks in town are talking a lot about you. Montgomery showed up at the bar yesterday asking about the horse you bought, said he was interested in acquiring it." "Montgomery wants to buy Obsidian?" Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Don't know, but he was. Offering much more than you paid. Much more." The foreman unloaded the groceries from the truck, and it wasn't just him. Some outsider in a suit showed up asking about the animal's genealogy, wanted to know where he came from, who the previous owners were. Sarah exchanged a significant look with Ethan. Seems like Obsidian is drawing more attention than we expected. The storm arrived late afternoon, with the characteristic violence of summer rains in the Texas plains. Lightning cut through the dark sky, while the wind shook trees with unusual force. Ethan and Sarah ran to check if Obsidian was protected in the covered corral. "He's too calm," observed Sarah, amazed at the horse's tranquility despite the furious storm. "Most horses get nervous with thunder, but look at him." Obsidian remained serene, but his eyes were fixed on the tool shed as if waiting for something specific. Suddenly, a particularly strong lightning bolt struck a tree near the shed, illuminating the entire area with an intense white light. "My God!" shouted Ethan. Over the noise of the rain, the tree caught fire. They ran through the torrential rain to assess the damage. The tree had been partially destroyed by the lightning, its roots exposed by the force of the impact, but it was what they saw in the ground that left them speechless. The soaked earth had given way around the base of the tree, revealing part of a buried stone structure, hand-worked stone blocks deliberately arranged as if part of an ancient construction. "This isn't natural," said Sarah, kneeling to better examine the stones. "Someone built this here." Ethan joined her, cleaning the mud from the stones with his hands. "They seem very old. Look how worn they are." Old Tom arrived running with tools and flashlights. When he saw the exposed stones, his face paled. "Jesus Christ, so it was true." "What was true, Tom?" "Your grandfather always said Billy had hidden something on the property. Something important, but we never found it." The foreman illuminated the structure with the flashlight. He said that when the time came, the land itself would show where it was. They worked for hours under the persistent rain, carefully digging around the stone structure. Gradually, they revealed a rectangular compartment, sealed with a heavy stone slab. Engraved on the slab, almost erased by time, was the same symbol from the medallion and the saddle. "We need more people to move this stone," said Ethan, calculating the weight of the slab. "No," replied old Tom. "This should stay between us for now. If Montgomery finds out—" With great effort and using improvised levers, they managed to move the slab enough to reveal the interior of the compartment. Inside, protected by a metal box wrapped in waxed canvas, they found documents, maps, and a diary with a leather cover. Sarah took the diary with trembling hands. The pages were yellowed but legible, written in careful calligraphy. "It's all here. Dates, names, detailed descriptions." Ethan opened one of the maps on an improvised table in the shed. It was a detailed map of the region, but the territorial divisions were completely different from the current ones. Properties that today belonged to Montgomery appeared marked with the name Anderson in various sections. "This can't be right," murmured Ethan. "According to this map, our property was 3 times larger than it is today." "And that's not all," said Sarah, reading the diary. "Listen to this. The alterations to the deeds were made gradually, always taking advantage of moments when families were in difficulty. Boundary markers were moved during the night, fences repositioned, documents altered in the registries. What took generations to build is being dismantled piece by piece." Old Tom approached, observing the documents with a mixture of admiration and sadness. Billy was a man ahead of his time. He knew that one day all this would come to light. Ethan continued studying the maps, comparing them with his memories of the property. "These lands that appear here, today they're all in Montgomery's hands. How did he manage this without anyone questioning?" "Because those who could question were gradually silenced," answered Sarah, still reading the diary. "Billy writes about pressures, subtle threats, offers that couldn't be refused, a carefully planned strategy to concentrate lands without drawing the authorities' attention. Outside, the storm was beginning to diminish, but Obsidian remained motionless at his observation post. It was as if the horse knew his mission was just beginning, that this discovery was only the first step of a much longer and more dangerous journey. "What do we do now?" asked Sarah. Ethan closed the diary and looked at his friends. "Now we find out how far this story goes, and we'll make sure the truth finally comes to light, even if it means confronting very powerful people." Outside, Obsidian neighed softly, as if approving the decision. The Guardian had fulfilled his first mission, leading those who sought the truth to where it was hidden. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The week following the discovery of the compartment brought a series of events that confirmed Ethan's suspicions about the forces working against them. On Monday, an elegant man introducing himself as a representative of a rural consulting company appeared offering land regularization services at a surprisingly low price. "Mr. Anderson, I know you inherited a large and complex property," said the man, his small eyes never fixing directly on Ethan's face. "Documentation issues can be very complicated. Our company specializes in resolving these problems efficiently." "What kind of problems?" asked Ethan, maintaining a casual tone despite his distrust. "Poorly defined boundaries, outdated deeds, registration issues that could cause headaches in the future. Better to prevent than remedy, don't you agree?" Ethan politely declined the offer, but the man insisted, leaving a card and promising to return when you've thought better about the complications that might arise. On Tuesday, it was the turn of a supposed buyer interested in Obsidian. A robust man, with an accent from outside the region, offered an absurd amount for the horse. "My boss collects rare horses," he explained. "Heard you have a unique specimen. We're willing to pay $15,000 cash." "The horse isn't for sale." "20,000 then. That's a lot of money for a problematic animal like that." The man's insistence, and the fact that he knew specific details about Obsidian's behavior, made Ethan even more alert. It wasn't a coincidence that so many people were interested in the horse exactly when he had discovered Billy's documents. Onifi. Wednesday, Sarah arrived at the ranch visibly disturbed. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. Last night someone tried to break into my place." "What do you mean?" "I woke up to my dogs barking. When I looked out the window, I saw a figure rummaging through my stable. When I turned on the lights, the person ran away." Sarah sat on the porch, running her hands through her hair. "They didn't take anything, but they went through all my things, as if they were looking for something specific." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "Are you sure it wasn't just a common thief?" "Common thieves don't ignore expensive equipment and go straight for the registration files of the horses I train. Someone was looking for information about Obsidian." Old Tom, who had been listening to the conversation, shook his head gravely. "Things are heating up. Maybe you should think about involving the authorities." "With what evidence?" asked Ethan. "Attempted break-in, purchase offers, consulting proposals. Individually, none of this is a crime. But together they show that someone really wants to prevent us from discovering the truth," completed Sarah. That afternoon, Ethan decided it was time to act. He took the most important documents found in the compartment and headed to the Riverdale County Records Office. The old building housed decades of regional records, and Ethan hoped to find evidence that corroborated the information in Billy's diary. The clerk who attended him was young, newly arrived in town. "Can I help you with something?" "I need to consult old property deeds from the region, specifically records of the Anderson Ranch and adjacent properties from, let's say, 30 years ago." "That's going to take some work. Records that old are archived in the basement. I'll need time to locate them." Ethan waited for more than 2 hours until the clerk returned, sweaty and with dirty hands. "I found some documents, but it's strange." "How so?" "Several files that should be here aren't, and some of the ones I found seem to have been, how can I put it, modified." "Look." The clerk showed a deed where it was possible to see that the text had been altered, with poorly disguised erasures and different handwriting. Ethan examined the documents with growing attention. It was exactly what Billy had documented in his diary, a systematic pattern of alterations and omissions that had redistributed lands over the years. "Can I make copies of these documents?" "Sure, but—" The clerk hesitated. "You haven't mentioned to anyone that you were researching this, have you?" "Why?" "Because a few months ago, an older gentleman came here doing the same kind of research, asked about the same lands, the same families. A week later, the young man lowered his voice. "He had a car accident on the highway. Nothing serious, but he was hospitalized for a while. When he got out, he never came back here. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Thurston, what did this man look like? Elderly, white hair, used a cane, said he was researching a relative who had disappeared years ago. The description perfectly matched someone who could be a brother or cousin of Billy, perhaps following the same trail of discoveries that Ethan was now following. Back at the ranch, Ethan shared his discoveries with Sarah and old Tom. The gravity of the situation was becoming increasingly clear. "We can't ignore this anymore," said Sarah. "You're following exactly the same steps as someone who ended up having an accident. This isn't a coincidence. So what do you suggest? That I give up? That I leave everything as it is?" "No, but we need to be more careful, and we need witnesses. People who know what we're doing and why." Old Tom stood up and walked to the window, observing Obsidian in the corral. "That horse brought you here for a reason. Billy didn't hide this information for it to remain buried forever. He wanted the truth to come to light. But maybe he didn't know the price it could cost," murmured Ethan. "Everyone who fights for justice knows there's a price," replied the foreman. "The question is whether you're willing to pay that price, or if you'll let injustice continue to spread." That night, Ethan stayed, awake for hours, watching Obsidian through the window. The horse remained vigilant, as if sensing that something was changing, that powerful forces were moving in the shadows. For the first time since buying the animal, Ethan completely understood why he was called Guardian. He wasn't just a horse. He was a symbol of resistance, living proof that some secrets are too important to remain buried, regardless of the consequences they might bring. The weekend brought a deceptive calm. Ethan had spent the last few days methodically organizing all the evidence found, creating copies of the most important documents, and preparing a complete dossier about the irregularities discovered. Sarah helped him catalogue each piece of evidence, while old Tom shared memories that corroborated the information in Billy's diary. "Your grandfather knew about some of these things," revealed the foreman during Saturday lunch. "He always suspected. The boundaries were being altered, but never had concrete proof. Sometimes I saw him arguing with Montgomery about fence markers that had gone missing during the night. Why did he never do anything?" "Your father was starting his life. You were small. Your grandfather didn't want to create problems that could affect the family. He always said he chose the battles worth fighting." Ethan reflected on the foreman's words. How many people had made the same choice over the years? How many times had injustice prevailed simply because it was easier not to fight? On Sunday morning, everything changed. Ethan was awakened by the desperate barking of the ranch dogs. Still in his pajamas, he ran to the porch and saw a scene that made his blood freeze. An unknown truck was parked near Obsidian's corral, and 3 men were trying to rope the horse. "Hey, what are you doing?" shouted Ethan, running toward the corral. The men turned, and one of them, the same one who had offered $20,000 for the horse, responded with false calm. "Easy, friend. We have a court order here. The horse will be seized for health issues." "What court order? Show me the document." The man vaguely waved a paper but didn't allow Ethan to get close enough to read it. "The horse shows signs of contagious disease. It needs to be removed immediately to avoid contaminating other animals in the region." Ethan knew it was a lie. Obsidian was in perfect health, and Sarah had done complete exams on the animal days before. But the men continued trying to rope him, ignoring Ethan's explanations. That's when old Tom appeared with a shotgun in his hands. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property," said the foreman with a calm but threatening voice. "That court order is as fake as hen's teeth." The men hesitated, clearly not expecting armed resistance. The leader of the group tried to maintain the facade. "Sir, we're just doing our job. We don't want trouble." "Then stop creating trouble and get out of here." After a few tense moments, the men gave up and left, but not before the leader left a message. "This won't end here. You'll end up regretting making things difficult." Sarah arrived half an hour later, called by Ethan's urgent phone call. She found him in the corral calming Obsidian, who was still agitated from the attempted seizure. "They tried to steal the horse?" she asked, incredulous. "Disguised as an official operation, but it was theft all the same. If Tom hadn't shown up," Ethan shook his head, This is getting too serious, Sarah. I can't pretend anymore that this is just coincidence. And what do you plan to do? Ethan looked at Obsidian, who had calmed down but remained vigilant. The horse stared at him with those intelligent eyes, as if waiting for an important decision. I'm going all the way. I'll take this to the press, to the police, to the district attorney. Someone will have to listen. And if they try to stop you? Then, at least other people will know the truth. I'll make copies of everything and distribute them to lawyers, journalists, anyone who can give visibility to the case. Old Tom approached, still carrying the shotgun. Son, are you sure about what you're doing? These people won't give up easily. I'm sure of one thing. I can't live knowing I have proof of so many injustices and do nothing. Billy didn't hide these documents for them to remain buried forever. That afternoon, Ethan spent hours on the phone contacting journalists from Austin and Dallas, law firms specializing in land issues, and representatives of the district attorney's office. Most showed interest, especially when he mentioned the extent of the documented irregularities. Mr. Anderson, if what you're saying is true, this could be one of the biggest land-grabbing schemes ever uncovered in Texas, said a prosecutor during a call. I need to see these documents personally. When can we meet? How about Monday? I can. Come to Riverdale in the morning. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with Obsidian, noting that the horse was more cooperative than ever, as if understanding that his role in the story was reaching its climax. He's different today, she commented. Calmer, more focused, as if he knows something important is about to happen. Maybe he does know, replied Ethan. Horses sense things we can't perceive. At night, the three gathered on the porch to discuss the next steps. The air was charged with expectation and apprehension. Monday, the prosecutor comes here, said Ethan. Tuesday, I go to Austin to meet with journalists. Wednesday, there's the meeting with the lawyers. And you think Montgomery will sit still watching all this happen? Asked Sarah. Probably not. That's why I need to act quickly before he has time to react. Old Tom contemplated the starry sky, lost in thought. You know what I think Billy would think of all this? What? I think he'd be proud. Proud to know his efforts weren't in vain, that someone had the courage to continue what he started. Ethan looked at Obsidian, who remained near the fence like a silent sentinel. I hope I'm doing the right thing. You are, said Sarah, taking his hand. And you're not doing it alone. We'll be with you every step of the way. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt truly confident about the future. He had the evidence, he had allies, and he had the determination necessary to see truth prevail. What he didn't know was that his actions had triggered a series of events that would test not only his courage, but also the loyalty of those around him. Monday dawned with a heavy atmosphere, as if nature itself sensed that something definitive was about to happen. Ethan had spent the night awake, organizing for the last time all the documents he would present to the prosecutor. Each page of Billy's diary, each altered map, each suspicious deed was catalogued and ready to be exposed. Prosecutor Henry Carter arrived punctually at 9 in the morning, accompanied by a documentation expert. He was a serious, middle-aged man, with the posture of someone who had seen many injustices throughout his career. Mr. Anderson, I must admit that when I received your call, I thought it might be just another case of family inheritance dispute. But after preliminarily analyzing some documents you sent me, Carter shook his head. This is much bigger than I imagined. Ethan led them to the improvised table in the shed, where all the documents were organized. Prosecutor, I want you to see this first. He showed the original map found in the compartment, comparing it with the current deeds. The differences were striking. Lands that historically belonged to various families in the region had been gradually concentrated in Montgomery's hands through an elaborate scheme of forgeries and legal maneuvers. Impressive, murmured the expert, examining the alterations in the deeds with a magnifying glass. Look here, prosecutor. This signature was clearly overlaid. And these dates, they were altered with different ink. Carter studied Billy's diary with growing attention. This man was documenting everything methodically. Names, dates, values, methods used. It's a real manual of how this scheme was executed. And that's not all, added Ethan. Billy also recorded the names of the registry office employees who facilitated the alterations, the amounts paid as bribes, even conversations he witnessed. It was when they reached the final pages of the diary that the most shocking discovery was revealed. Billy had discovered that Montgomery wasn't acting alone. He was just the visible face of a much larger scheme, which involved people in positions of power in various instances of the state government. "My God," whispered Carter, reading a specific passage. "If this is true, we're talking about a corruption scheme that goes far beyond local land issues." Sarah, who had remained silent during the presentation, finally spoke. "Prosecutor, there's one more thing you need to know." She told about the pressures they had suffered, the attempts to forcibly buy the horse, the break-in at her place, and finally the attempted seizure of Obsidian on Sunday. "They're desperate," observed Carter, "and desperate people make mistakes. This fraudulent seizure attempt could be the loose thread we need to start dismantling the whole operation." Old Tom, who had observed everything in silence, approached the group. "Prosecutor, there's something we haven't told you yet." "What would that be?" Billy didn't disappear alone. He had help hiding the documents and also leaving the region when he discovered his life was in danger. Ethan looked at the foreman in surprise. "What do you mean, Tom?" "Your grandfather helped Billy get out of here, gave him money, provided documents, arranged a safe place for him to hide." The old man sighed deeply. "Billy didn't disappear. He left because he knew if he stayed he wouldn't live to tell the story. And where is he now?" "That I don't know. Your grandfather never told me, said it was safer that way. But before leaving, Billy left something besides the documents." Old Tom walked to an old cabinet in the shed and removed a wooden box that Ethan had never seen. Inside the box were letters, photographs, and more documents. "Additional evidence," explained the foreman. "Photographs of secret meetings, copies of checks, recordings of conversations. Your grandfather made me promise that I would only show this if the day came when someone was truly willing to take the fight to the end." The prosecutor examined the contents of the box with growing excitement. "Mr. Anderson, what we have here is sufficient not only to reverse the illegal land appropriations, but also to dismantle an entire corruption network that has been operating for decades." It was then that Sarah made the observation that would change everything. "Prosecutor, have you noticed that in all these photographs and documents, Montgomery always appears accompanied by the same person?" Carter examined the images more carefully. "You're right. This man beside him appears in practically all situations." Ethan looked over the prosecutor's shoulder and felt his world collapse. The man in the photographs, always beside Montgomery, in secret meetings and suspicious transactions, was a familiar face, the young clerk from the registry office who had assisted him a few days before. "It can't be," murmured Ethan. "He said he was new in town, that he had just arrived." "He lied," said Carter dryly. "And he probably already knew exactly who you were when you showed up there. Your visit to the registry office didn't go unnoticed." The revelation hit Ethan like a punch in the stomach. He had been naive, trusted too much. His actions had been monitored from the beginning, and Montgomery knew exactly what documents he had found and what steps he was planning to take. "This means they know the prosecutor is here today," said Sarah, concern clear in her voice. "Probably," confirmed Carter, "but this also means we have no more time to lose. I need to take these documents immediately to Austin and initiate a complete investigation operation." It was at that moment they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Through the shed window, they saw 3 trucks heading toward the ranch, raising a cloud of red dust. "Montgomery," said Old Tom, recognizing the first truck. Ethan felt a mixture of fear and determination. "He won't intimidate me anymore. Now we have witnesses, we have evidence, we have everything we need." The prosecutor quickly organized the most important documents in his briefcase. "Mr. Anderson, I'd better leave through the back door. These documents need to reach the proper authorities." "No," said Ethan firmly. "Enough hiding, enough running. It's time to face this situation head on." Outside, Obsidian had noticed the arrival of the unwanted visitors. The horse positioned himself in the center of the corral, proud and defiant, as if he were a guardian protecting a sacred treasure. Ethan looked at the animal and, for the first time, completely understood what Billy had seen in those eyes. It wasn't just a horse. It was a symbol of resistance, living proof that some truths are too important to be silenced, no matter how powerful those who try to hide them are. Montgomery got out of the truck with his usual arrogance, but Ethan noticed something different in his eyes, a restlessness he couldn't completely disguise. The landowner was accompanied by two men whom Ethan recognized as those who had tried to seize Obsidian, plus the young clerk from the registry office, whose presence confirmed all suspicions. "Ethan, we need to talk," said Montgomery, trying to maintain a conciliatory tone. "It seems you're getting involved in matters you don't completely understand." "On the contrary, Montgomery, I think I'm finally understanding everything very well." Ethan left the shed, followed by Sarah, Old, Tom and Prosecutor Carter, "Including why you're so interested in my horse." Montgomery's expression changed when he saw the prosecutor. "And who might you be?" "Henry Carter, State District Attorney's Office. And you must be Richard Montgomery, about whom we have many questions to ask." The registry clerk whispered something in Montgomery's ear, who visibly paled. It was obvious they hadn't expected to find an official representative there. "Prosecutor, there's been a misunderstanding," Montgomery tried. "I just came here to make an honest business proposal to Ethan." "What kind of business proposal involves fraudulent animal seizure attempts and property break-ins?" asked Carter dryly. It was then that something happened that no one expected. Obsidian, who had remained calm observing the scene, began to agitate violently when the wind brought the smell of one of Montgomery's men, the same one who had tried to rope him on Sunday. The horse reared and neighed forcefully, his eyes fixed on the man, with an almost supernatural intensity. And then, to everyone's surprise, Obsidian jumped the corral fence with impressive agility and ran directly toward the group. "Look out!" shouted Sarah, but quickly realized the horse wasn't attacking. Obsidian stopped right in front of the registry clerk and began to sniff his clothes intensely, as if recognizing a specific smell. "He's recognizing something," said Sarah, carefully approaching the horse. "Obsidian, what is it?" The registry clerk tried to move away, clearly nervous, but Obsidian followed him, continuing to sniff and neigh in an agitated manner. "Interesting," observed the prosecutor. "It seems your horse knows this young man from somewhere." It was Old Tom who made the connection. "Wait a minute. That perfume that makes Obsidian nervous, it's the same this fella is wearing." Ethan approached and confirmed. It was the same sweet, nauseating aroma he had noticed on other occasions when the horse became agitated. "You've been here before," said Ethan to the clerk. "Haven't you?" The young man tried to deny it, but his desperate expression gave him away. Montgomery realized the situation was getting out of control. "Enough!" exploded Montgomery. "I'm going to end this farce once and for all. Ethan, you don't know who you're messing with. I have friends in important places. I can make your life hell." "Like you did with Billy?" asked Ethan calmly. The mention of Billy's name was like a bomb. Montgomery went livid, and the registry clerk took a step back. "How do you—" Montgomery began, but didn't finish the sentence. "How do I know about Billy? About the falsified documents? About the land-grabbing scheme you've been running for decades?" Ethan smiled bitterly, because he left everything documented. Every fraudulent transaction, every bribe, every threat. Prosecutor Carter opened his briefcase and removed some photographs. "Do you recognize these images, Mr. Montgomery?" The photographs showed Montgomery in secret meetings, receiving money envelopes, signing documents in clandestine encounters. In many of them, the registry clerk was present. "Where did you get this?" asked Montgomery, his voice now betraying desperation. "The same place where we got the original maps of the properties, the genuine deeds, and Billy's complete diary," replied Ethan. He knew that one day the truth would come to light. Montgomery looked around, realizing he was cornered. His accomplices began to back away, clearly unwilling to face the consequences of decades of crimes. "This won't end here," Montgomery threatened. "One last time. "You don't know what you're doing." "We know exactly what we're doing," said Prosecutor Carter, "and you're under arrest for racketeering, document forgery, land grabbing, and corruption." It was at that moment that more vehicles appeared on the road, civil police cars that Carter had discreetly called during the conversation. Montgomery and his accomplices were detained without resistance, their expressions of arrogance replaced by the desperation of defeat. As the police led the prisoners away, Sarah approached Obsidian, who had completely calmed down after the confrontation. "You knew, didn't you? Knew this day would come." The horse lowered his head, allowing her to pet him for the first time since Ethan had bought him. It was as if his mission had been fulfilled, as if he could finally rest. "Prosecutor," said Ethan, "what happens now with the lands?" "Based on the evidence you've provided, we'll initiate a restitution process. All properties illegally obtained will be returned to their rightful owners or their heirs. It will be a long process, but justice will be done." 3 months later, Ethan was on the porch of his ranch, now restored to its original dimensions, watching Obsidian grazing peacefully in the fields that had been returned to the Anderson family. Sarah had moved to the neighboring property she had inherited from a distant aunt, revealed by the documents as being originally much larger than she had imagined. "Do you think Billy knows we succeeded?" asked Sarah, sitting beside Ethan. "I'm sure he knows," replied old Tom, joining them, "and I'm sure he's proud." The foreman had received a letter that morning, the first communication from Billy in 30 years. The old cattle driver was alive, living quietly in a small town in Colorado, and had learned through the newspapers about Montgomery's arrest and the recovery of the lands. "He said he'll come home soon," old Tom told them. "Said it's finally safe to return." Ethan smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in months. The C ranch was thriving again. The lands had been returned to the families who had unjustly lost them, and Montgomery would face years in prison along with his accomplices. "And Obsidian? What will his future be?" asked Sarah. Ethan looked at the horse, who raised his head as if he had heard his name. "I think he'll stay exactly where he always belonged, here protecting these lands and guarding their history." Obsidian neighed softly, as if agreeing, and returned to grazing. The sun set slowly over the Texas plains, painting everything golden, and for the first time in decades, true peace had returned to those lands. Ethan took Sarah's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you for staying by my side through all this." "Always," she replied, smiling. "Some battles are worth fighting." Old Tom stood up, observing the stars beginning to appear in the sky. "You know what I think your grandfather would say if he were here?" "What?" "That sometimes the land chooses its own defenders, and that you were chosen for a reason." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the satisfaction of having honored his family's memory and made justice prevail. Obsidian had been much more than a horse. He had been the guardian of a truth that needed to be revealed, the symbol of a resistance that had never been truly defeated. And now, finally, his vigil had ended. Truth had triumphed, and the Texas plains could rest in peace, knowing their story was safe in the hands of those who truly loved and respected them.